Recording.
Good morning, ladies, and thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. We are now entering Parshas Lech Lecha, and we are going to call this the changing of our guard. That's what we're going to call Parshas Lech Lecha this year. Basically, I'm going to base myself on two verses, but we're going to go all over the place with them. The first two verses in our holy Parsha, where Hashem tells Avram Avinu, our great forefather, who we're so fortunate to be descendants of, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go from your land, u'mimoladecha, from your birthplace, u'mibeis avicha, from your father's house, el haaretz asher eka, to the land I will show you. V'ascha l'goy gadol, I will make you a great nation, v'avarechecha, and I will bless you, v'agad l'shemecha, and I will also make your name great, famous, v'heyeh bracha. Those are the first two verses. And we have some questions begging for clarification on these verses, and hopefully we'll get into some amazing life-changing lessons. Okay, first of all, when we say me'artzecha, from your land, it's always often asked, but let's do it on an adult level now. The order is reversed from the usual place that a person would leave. First it says, leave your land and your birthplace and your father's house. If you would be just physically leaving somewhere, you're first leaving your home and then your city and then your country. Why is it in this reverse order? Rashi mentions al kol psia v'psia. You're going to be rewarded for every step. What's the significance there? Every step. And in Rashi also says lech lecha. Why does it say go for yourself? Rashi says lahanascha u'letovascha, for your pleasure and for your benefits. What's the significance there? Okay, why do we need that to be told? Because in fact, afterwards, I don't have it, the Chumash in front of me, because I was quoting from another sefer, but the next pasuk says, and Abraham did what Hashem told him. He said, Vayelech Avram kasher diber elav. Avram went like Hashem told him, and that seems to imply he just did it because he was told to do so, not because it's for his benefit and it's for his good. It doesn't seem like he went with the script. How do we understand that? Also, what's the understanding later in the Parsha that Avram has a name change? His name before was Avram, and he gets the added hey, and Sarai becomes Sarah. What's the thing after that? Another two questions we're going to throw in. You know, we're asked by Rav Nassim Bachvogel Zatzal, Mashgiach from Lakewood. He asked the question, Avram at this point is 75 years old when he's given this commandment to leave your birthplace and your father's house. Is it so hard to do such a test at 75 years old? No, I'm sorry, it was not Rav Nassim Bachvogel. This is the Mikdash Halevi, Rav Dunner, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, the father of the whole Dunner family. He was a Rav in London. He asked the question, this is after Abraham is willing to jump into the fiery furnace in Bavel, lest he, instead of bowing down to an idol, he's willing to succumb to have the fiery furnace consume him rather than bow down to idols. That's the first test. That's pretty major. And then the second test, Lech Lecha, 75-year-old man, how hard is it for him rather, to leave his father's home, et cetera, et cetera. He's married at that point. Like, you know, how many people leave their parents' home much before 75 years old? What's the test there? And that if there's some type of progression where the last test was the Akedah, how can we understand that this is the second test? All right, so those, ladies, are our questions for today. Let's come up with some amazing ideas and presentations from some great Rabbanim of today and from yesteryear, and we will come up with some great life lessons. Okay, and at the end, we'll take questions. Okay, let's first bring down Rav Nevin Sal Shlita, the holy Rav of the old city of Yerushalayim, an extremely humble man. Like I had the pleasure, Sarah Ben Zakai, set me up to go to his house for a Shabbos. I'll never forget it. I went there when he was married to his first wife. I went there with my son and his wife and baby, and I'll never forget that Shabbos. He didn't even sit at the head of the table. He didn't even make Kiddush. And this was a person that's like a genius in the whole Torah and everything else. And just what a person. And his knowledge is supposed to be phenomenal of everything. My son was blown away by his knowledge of everything. And meanwhile, he conducts himself like a very simple, average person. Any case, So Nebenzahl says like this. He says that it says in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Yitzchak says that there are several things that can tear up a person's evil decree. If a person, three things a person is born with, Banai, Chayai, Umazonai, it says in Moed Katan. Three things, you're born with a destiny. If you're going to have children, if so, how many and how they'll be, and the kind of parnasa you'll have, and how long your lifespan will be. That's something that's predetermined, we believe. I remember reading something from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, where he said that a person, your health is in your hands. In other words, how healthy you'll be is up to you, but your lifespan is predetermined. It's not up to, unless you do something absolutely foolish, then you're to blame. But if you don't do something absolutely foolish, your lifespan is already predetermined. But several things can change a person's decree. And here they are. Tzedakah, giving charity. Sa'aka, screaming out to Hashem, really, Shari Demo, Sloni Nalu, the gates of tears are never closed. Shinui Hashem, changing your name. The Shinui Masa, and changing your actions. Yesh Omrim, and some people say, Af Shinui Makom, even changing your place. So, and how do we know changing your place can change your mazel? We see from Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu did not have children. As soon as he left his place, he married later, he became a goy gadol, like in the second verse. And it says, Rashi brings, it says, Sham escha legoy gadol. You'll become a goy gadol. And bekan, if you're going to stay in Haran, iyat hazocha lebanim. You won't merit having children. So he had to change his place in order to change his mazel. So the Gemara says, so there's a different opinion though in the Gemara. And the reason why Rav Yitzchak did not mention changing the place, because Yesh Omrim, Rav Yitzchak did not even include changing the place, is because Rav Yitzchak assumed the merit of Eretz Yisrael. That's what the Torah says. He brings down Rav Nebenzahl, that the Torah says that the merit of Eretz Yisrael will be enough. You don't need to change. It's not changing a place. It's changing your place to Eretz Yisrael, which is really going to be significant. Okay, so that's what we have so far. So that the Gemara explains that several things can change your evil decree: screaming out to Hashem through prayer, or giving tzedakah, changing your name, and changing your actions, doing tshuva. It's just like tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, really. But the Gemara adds changing your place sometimes. If nothing else works, changing your place can help you. But it doesn't mention specifically, according to Rav Yitzchak, because Rav Yitzchak holds Eretz Yisrael alone is enough to change your destiny. Just being in Eretz Yisrael. So if a person moves and they move to Eretz Yisrael, you've got it all. You've covered all bases. Now, why is changing a place so significant, says Rav Nebenzahl, without Eretz Yisrael? We're not just talking about Eretz Yisrael. Why is there an opinion that changing your place can make such an impression? We find one thing that occurs when a person changes. This is so relevant to, I had to include this today because there's so many families now leaving Toronto. I've heard there are 70 families at this point moving out of Toronto, and it's very timely for the Parsha. When a person moves to another place, there's a certain degree of shame that takes place. You have to be a little bit in the beginning. You don't know where the streets are leading. You're not familiar with the best groceries to go to. You're a little bit vulnerable. You're more than a little bit. I once was on a plane with someone, a person from Toronto, and they were describing how their family had built their elderly mother a whole like in-law suite or whatever you call it in the back of their home. She moved, I believe, from Williamsburg to Borough Park. So we're not even talking a state change or a country change. We're talking about the other side of Brooklyn, right? So she moved into her kids. They gave her their own private area, her own, she's her own home connected to their home. And she was now going to be on her own. Within a week or two, she couldn't handle it anymore. She says, I got up in the morning in Williamsburg. I knew the butcher. I knew the bakery. I knew where to go. I knew, and here I don't know anybody. I'm just with my children. I'm, they know everybody. And I'm just like a appendage to my children. So the same thing here, we're talking about When you go to a place, you don't even know that. It gives you a certain degree of humility. That's the good thing about changing place. He mentions even the person that kills accidentally, Rotzeach Bishgaga. He has to go to an Ir Miklat. He leaves most of his community, and he doesn't know too many people. That gives him a tremendous amount of humility. That's why, says Reb Nebenzahl, there were many Gedolim that used to flee and go to Gullahs that, like the Vilna Gaon did a lot of Hasidic greats did that, to dress up like a pauper and go out just, for humility purposes. Like it makes you remember who you really are in this world, how we're a bump in the log. You may be the linchpin in Toronto, but if you go to, let's say, Venezuela or Buenos Aires or somewhere else, you're a nobody. You know what I mean? So it teaches us humility. So that's the very good element. When you change your place, it does add humility to your life. Another great application of changing location is when you change your location, you change your atmosphere. Often our atmosphere, this is why particularly Eretz Yisrael is a good change, but in any case, when you change your atmosphere, a lot of times the reason why a person could be on hard times, hard luck, is because the atmosphere is not conducive to him. That we don't realize how influenced we are by our environment. It's unbelievable. You're changing, your whole environment. Now he's not saying that your environment caused it, but it's segula. It helps you. It's meritorious for you. When you leave your environment, it gives you an idea. You know what? I'm turning a new page. I'm going to be in a different situation. How affected are we by our environment? It's unbelievable. Like this generation, maybe we're more of a melting pot, but our parents' generation, people that were refugees that came from Europe, every country had its own thing. I went to seminary in Breuers, which is no longer, but it was a wonderful experience. Breuers was in New York, and it was a Frankfurt community, Everybody there, because they came from Frankfurt, when there was shul davening times, everyone was there 5 minutes early. The whole shul. If you came in 3 minutes early, everyone looks at you like, why are you here 3 minutes late? Or 2 minutes late rather. The influence of the Germans, obviously. The Hungarians, how by the way they cook and by the way they dress and by the way they furnish their homes, they came from a Hungarian. So we were very influenced by our environment from Europe. There's a tremendous influence there that has to be accounted for, And what do we say today? What do we bring in our house? We bring in the cell phone. We have to be so careful that we're not bringing in the street into our homes. That is what breaks our connection with Hashem. Everyone else, the whole world thinks so differently than the Jewish people think. We think that we have a mission here to serve Hashem, and everything around us is really a test. A test. Can we have pure intentions? And in fact, Avram Avinu was told one of the reasons everyone says to leave his environment, and it starts with the father's house. You're the most influenced from your parents and from your family surroundings, and then you're second most influenced by your city, and then the country, etc. So it was his influence he had to rid himself of. He had to leave that whole environment, and only then can he come closer to Hashem, because the environment sticks. If it's good, where it makes you early to shul, that's wonderful. But there's a lot of, as we know, there's, especially today in the world, we're living in a cesspool. I'm not exaggerating, a cesspool. I could say that on public domain here, because this kind of the thinking of the world around us, so self-centered and egocentric and anti-God. And we live in such an environment, we have to close our ears to it and try to not be influenced by the things that are going on in the street. So those are the two things that really change when we change our environment, is that we're trying to get to rid ourselves of the influences that take us away from our relationship with Hashem, remembering that life is temporary. You read, what's going on today. It could be like this, even the news. It could be like thrilling. Oh my God, this just happened. So how do we know what's going to happen next? We have to have bitachon that Hashem can help us. And sometimes having too much connection with the news can take us away from Hashem, because we get too frightened. This is going to happen and that is happening. And, it can be really something. Where Victor Miller mentions, when a man has to go into an Ir Miklat, when a person has killed by accident, he has to go to city of refuge, right? Somewhere in Eretz Yisrael, 6 cities were designated, and the cities of the Levium. So we'd have to influence the Levium, because if someone killed by accident, obviously, not that they're a big sinner, but there's something you have to think about. Something they have to think about, and here's a place to think. They're going to be with people just doing the service of Hashem, and hopefully it'll change his environment. But there's something really interesting with all that. He has to be provided all his needs in the Ir Miklat, right? Now, what does he need? Now, it says B'chai, what is that? The exact lesson is, I think it just says B'chai, yeah. B'chai. He has to run to one of these cities and live. So the Gemara learns, what does it mean he has to live? He has to have all the things necessary. Victor Miller mentions today, he said in his day, prisoners had a revolt in a prison because their television wasn't color. Because that's living. How can you live without a television, a color television, everything else? But that's not one of the things the Torah considers that's necessary. But it says instead, Talmud Shegalam Maglin Rabo Imo. Whoever has a Rebbe, your Rebbe has to leave his yeshiva, wherever he's doing, he's got to leave and go with the person that kills accidentally and be with him in his gullus. He has to be with him in his Ir Miklat. Because we could have thought, maybe that's the olden days, says Rav Victor Bella. We could have thought just send the library, send all his farm with him. He won't be without the proper inspiration. But no, the Torah is telling us we don't have inspiration. Besides the Sviva, besides being in a good place, everyone needs a mentor. Everyone needs a Rebbe. It's not just for Hasidim. It's everyone needs a Rebbe. And in fact, what ends up happening is the whole yeshiva ends up going because they also don't want to leave their Rebbe. Sometimes, or a lot of people could go as well. Because today there's no change. Even with all the books we have and it's phone shiurim and everything, person needs a Rebbe to direct them in life. It's always, many people say that when a person's checking out shidduchim, one of the main things for a boy, if he has a Rebbe, then we know that there's someone there, there's someone to talk to. If they have a conflict of whatever it is in raising children or whatever, there's going to be one voice, that of Das Torah, that the two of them will both listen to. And she has to be willing to listen to people. If people have their own minds about things, doing things their way, then there's no hope for them as far as growing in Avodas Hashem. It's not enough to just have books and shiurim. We have to have a Rebbe to guide us the proper way of living. Because Torah is not just a code of books. It's not just a legal system, which it is, but it's also, we need desperately a Rebbe to be with us, and we have to know how the Rebbe lives and what the Rebbe does, and even no matter where a person lives. They asked Rav Chaim Kanievsky recently. There was a whole write-up in the TED asking different big gedolim about raising children today. So they asked Rav Chaim Kanievsky, how old does a person have to be to not need a Rebbe? So Rav Chaim Kanievsky says 100. How about that? A person needs a Rebbe. Now, we women, we have either, if you're fortunate enough to have a husband, you go according to your husband's Rebbe. And you should, for yourself, avail yourself of whatever you need to know. There should be somebody you're following direction to and not going on your own course of action. And if someone without a husband has to find a Rebbe, we have to have someone we can ask, not just chicken shilas, but life shilas, because Torah is a way of life. It's not just a book. And that's part of our necessary environment that we have to avail ourselves of when we are having when we are in a certain environment. We need to live near someone that's going to be our mentor wherever we live. Now, so far, just to recap what we've said so far, that one of the things we said we have to change is our place, and the place lends itself to more humility. We also feel a freshness, a newness. It also teaches us that we have to change our environment. We have to rethink the environment and how the environment influences us. And part of that is having a manhig, having a leader, a mentor that we will listen to and avail ourselves of, and hopefully help us change. Now, there's a big thing in change. He brings down Rav Nevinsal that changing place, rather, to moving to it's always more money to move to a good neighborhood, a frum neighborhood. That's our test of today. the more from the neighborhood, the more expensive the place. That's how it is. But when we're in a firm environment, we gain so much. And he said, Reb Nevenzel mentions, one of the 39 categories of prohibitions on Shabbos is carrying. And it's interesting, carrying does not seem to be a creative activity like some of the others. Like, if you're plowing, you're doing something, you're changing the soil, right? If you're baking, cooking, you're changing the status of this food. It's going to change its color or change shape, consistency, whatever it may be. However, changing place, we're learning that moving furniture out of an area, it's a different world. Moving, and that reminds me of the halachas of blessings. There's a whole thing. If you're not eating mazonos, if you're not eating hamotzi, if you change your place, you need a new bracha. There's a whole thing there with changing location. Why? Think about it. If let's say you're eating an egg, okay, and you all of a sudden go outside, somebody tells you have to come outside right now for something very important. Person goes outside. If they come back to eat their egg again, unless they could see the original site from where they're going, whatever, they have to make a new bracha on the same egg, right? Why? Because when you go outside, you're very distracted. You forget about your meal. You see the traffic, you see this one, you see that one. Very good thing to use if we're very up or if we're very down. Person's like, especially in the winter, but person's like, in the winter, they're down, or a person's angry. It's good to change location, because all of a sudden you're going to see this, you're going to see that. Different places change your mood. A friend of mine, Haleshal Esther Perel Grown, I remember when she went through the deepest throes of her divorce, sometimes she would just walk up and down the aisles of a drugstore. And I don't know if it was anger, whatever it was, something she had to clear her mind for some reason. She found that was very helpful for her to, change her space. And we have to think of that. Changing place can often, a lot of times people, are adamant, I don't have to go on a vacation. But I think the biggest thing is it's a vacation of the mind. And I'm not advocating for long vacations. I'm just saying a person to change location, even for a short while, to get out of it. If you're stuck somewhere for too long and he starts getting to, that's why a person needs sometimes a refresh. Okay. Second thing we talked about, we said, we talked about tefillah, the gates of tefillah never close. Tzedakah, of course, can take away your evil decree. Now, what is the idea of Shinui Hashem, changing your name? So he mentions when you change your name, really we shouldn't have to come to that, but if a person has to change their name, he's not Shimon anymore, he's Chaim Shimon. So now Chaim Shimon, he wakes up in the morning, I have a different name. It gives you a feeling of freshness that you have to start again. And it reminds you, there's something you have to restart, you have to refresh. Here we are right after the Yom Noraim. We had, I'm sure all of us had in mind, things were going to change. And now here is our opportunity to really make a change. Let's change. Let's not be the same, person we were. Let's, like changing your name, we can change your essence. It's a segula that they employ, said Reb Nevenzel, but it's something we can use to change our whole influence. Okay, so that's the first lesson we have, is the whole idea of changing, the freshness, the newness, the humility it brings, and also how we can't minimize how the environment influences us. Now, with all that, we're just going to throw this as an aside. The Mikdash Shalevi says something unbelievable. I just had to throw this in. It's not really in line with what we're speaking about, but it follows one of the questions, and I'm just a little off topic, but it's very important. Avram Avinu had to go through this whole change. He had to leave his father's place and this and this and this to the place I'll show you. The Medrash says there was a little bit of hesitation on Avram's part. It was a test for him, despite him being 75 years old. Why? Because Avram Avinu, despite being married and 75, he said, Hashem, what's it going to look like if I'm leaving my elderly father, Terach, in order to go wherever you show me? Hashem didn't even mention it's going to the Holy Land. Hashem just told him, wherever I'm showing you. How can I leave my father? So Hashem, so to speak, you look at the past Parsha, at the end of the Parsha, Terach passes away to enable Avram to leave with a good conscience, that he did not transgress. Hashem told him first, according to the Medrash, I absolve you. You don't have to keep it up. Well, I mean, people are absolved when there's a wicked father. They're absolved to a certain degree. And he's 75 years old. But he says this should give pause to all those people that feel they could just get out of, taking care of their elderly parents. Avram Avinu did not want to get out of that mitzvah. He did not want to absolve himself of caring for his elderly father. And with this, that was his challenge of Lech Lecha, despite being 75 and married. And Hashem, so to speak, made it easier for him to just leave everything. Okay, now the next point that I'd like to get to right now is from Rav Shimshon Pincus, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha. And when we're going to address the question, so far we've answered the question about why changing in this order, why we had to leave in this order. And also it was harder than the fiery furnace. We're going to get into that in a minute. But being 75 years old, big task is because of Kibbut Aim. Okay, next question that we're going to address is that Avram Avinu, when he leaves, he went like Hashem commanded him. Now, why did it say, Lahanascha u'letovascha? You're going for your benefit and for your pleasure. Why? So Shimshon Pincus explains that any mitzvah we perform has two plus sides to it. Plus side number one, benefits, is you are accomplishing something. You know, lulav and etrog, you're taking a lulav in one hand, etrog in another hand, you're going to do the mitzvah as you're supposed to, and by that way you're achieving a mitzvah, right? Or chesed, there's an elderly person that needs help and you are now helping them, you have performed a mitzvah. Or whether it's tzedakah, you're giving charity somewhere and it's now maintaining a shul. But there's a second side. Every mitzvah has two components. One side is what you've accomplished. The second side is every mitzvah lends itself to perfecting your soul. And Rav Shimshon Pincus asked the question, which one do you think is more important, more vital? I did this a few times. I had a questionnaire of classes I taught. Believe it or not, it was split down the middle. And if anything, most people would say you're benefiting. If you do chesed, for example, the main thing you're doing is benefiting another person. You know, that's the objective. The mitzvah itself has tremendous benefit. But Shimshon Pincus brings down a pasuk. It says, "Ezehu chasid hamischased im kono." Who is a person who's considered righteous? A person who does kind or pious, or a big bal chesed, who's a person that does acts of kindness. A person does chesed with his creator. So what's the rationale behind that? So Shimshon Pincus says, the one thing I just want to get where this, I just didn't write this down. I'm sorry, this is not a pasuk, this is Chazal. It's in the Zohar, Parshas Mishpatim. He said the real true chesed is one that you do with your creator. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think the creator needs me too much. You know, there's not much I could do for my creator. He didn't ask me if any drinks of water today. He didn't ask me for advice. You know, what is the biggest chesed doing chesed with your creator? So Shimshon Pincus says something very profound and important. He says, Hashem doesn't need anything, right? But there's one thing Hashem doesn't have. One thing you can do that Hashem needs from you that he can't do for you. And that is to perfect yourself. You can't perfect it. He can't perfect you. He gave you your soul with all these trials and tribulations in this world. And our mission is to improve ourselves. That's what we're here for. So now it's like he's trying to say like this. We have two parts of a mitzvah. The one, the accomplishment, you kept Shabbos, you kept kosher, you did all these things, but you're also perfecting yourself as a sidebar, side benefit. But to Hashem, that's the main thing, is how much you perfect yourself. So we see from here that the main thing is the accomplishment is not the main thing. The main thing is the effort. And that should be a big boost to people if, God forbid, someone's in a hospital bed. If somebody is not able to accomplish as much as their friend, you know, some people, there's always a lady we all know who's got 12 children and running off to do chesed day and night, and she has boundless energy and everything else, and sometimes maybe a little money on the side. She can do all those acts of chesed. And then there's other people barely just get through the day, you know, surviving their children and their families. And that is not to put us down. The main thing Hashem wants is perfection, like to make the moment perfect, to perfect ourselves in every situation we're given, to have the best midos, to have the best, you know, to daven with the most fervor when we're davening. And it doesn't matter even the accomplishments. I heard on the Bitachon hotline that he mentioned the person doesn't daven with kavanah. At one point, let's say he's very stressed or whatever. Some people are more nervous than others. Some people are more upset than others. Some people have a harder day than others. If you regret at one point in your davening, I'm not davening with enough kavanah, he said you get reward from all the past thing that you didn't daven with kavanah. It's like tshuva. Hashem considers you wiped clean the whole slate. You said, I want to daven with kavanah, Hashem. I really do. So perfection is not necessarily davening with kavanah. Sometimes it's harder for certain people, especially women, I think. But the main thing is the effort. The effort is really that. And that's what Hashem wants from us. Now, each individual has their own unique mission. No two people look exactly alike. No two people have the identical mission. Last week's parsha, we talked about the tower, the Migdal Bavel, and where humanity was not as important as the mission. See, the accomplishment was more. As it says in the Medrash, if a brick would fall from the tower, people would mourn. But if a baby fell down, they'd say, oh, one less mouth to feed. Aren't we living like that today when the common cause is more important? I mean, you look at hospitals today, they don't want to pamper people that are sick or that are going through a hospital stay. People today have to go to the hospital. They have to bring their own diapers. They have to bring their own wipes. Nobody's going to lend a hand to you because the common good, we can have more people coming in and out of the hospital, or the common good, more people that could be off of unemployment or whatever. We're giving more money to everybody. And then meanwhile, everybody is kind of suffering. The people, each individual doesn't matter. It's the cloud. Says Rav because he says, although Hitler, Yamach Shemal, murdered 6 million Jews and countless others because he had a hatred for certain races or certain peoples, whatever it was, Stalin, he says, was worse in a respect. He killed 10 million people, and he had 10,000 people, tens of thousands of people exiled to Siberia. Why? Because people didn't count. It was the mission, the world he had to build, the new world order, which who knows if the Great Reset, what order they're going on. Each person is important. Each person has a perfection they can reach, and we have to celebrate that. I always like to talk about Rebbetzin Adler. She should rest. She should be gesund and stark. The wife of Rabbi Adler, Zechron Levrach Lahavdil. He was such a tzaddik in our city. And Rebbetzin Adler should be gesund and stark. I remember this story. My daughter told it to me, and I always tell it over, usually once a year at least. And that is, Rebbetzin Adler had a shul where anyone felt comfortable. Everybody could walk into that shul, all stripes, all kinds, all peoples. And the Rebbetzin really made every single person got a good Shabbos from her. Every person was meant to feel important because the perfection of each person, it's not the accomplishment the person does in this world. It's how perfect they've made themselves. What's the relationship to Hashem? How much have they improved their character? So there was a family in shul that was like not such a high class family, financially on the rungs. And also the family was a little bit, you'd say nerdy, nebuch, whatever you want to call them. And in the shul, she had multimillionaires davening also. So on one Shabbos, they were making a bar mitzvah that this family that it wasn't such a popular family in the community. And people were starting to get up and leave. It was a small kiddush, but people were leaving after davening. She blocked the door, literally. She put her, come, it's a bar mitzvah. And she started cutting cake and serving it to everyone to make sure they stayed for the bar mitzvah. That's thinking of the individual, that every individual means something, that, you really care about someone, that you're thinking of the individual. That's the Torah outlook. Stories about Rav Moshe Feinstein. He was delayed once speaking to a bunch of Rabbanim. They had a huge Klal Yisrael issue going on, and they're waiting for Moshe Feinstein to appear. And he had this woman that was like a little bit, a lot psychotic, that was telling him the aliens are coming, as a survivor of a Holocaust. And he waited until he calmed her down, and then he came. He walked in late. They all had to wait. The whole Klal had to wait because there was an individual in pain. And that's what we have to think sometimes. Sometimes for the sake of an individual, even the Klal has to wait. That's the difference between our outlook and the outlook of the Tower of Babel, the outlook of Stalin. And a weird thing is, a human being is important, that each human being can be like Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rambam tells us, could get a portion of the world to come. Your portion of the world to come is based and how much you perfected yourself. One mitzvah done with perfection gains you entry to Olam Haba. But perfection is a big thing. You're not doing it for any other purpose. It's going to be a mitzvah you yourself are not even aware that you performed. That type of mitzvah. There's a famous story of Hanina ben Tradian. Ben Tradian or Ben Dosa. Wait a minute. I'm sorry, Rav Hanina ben Tradian came to visit his Rebbe, Rav Yossi ben Kisma. I see Rav Hanina ben Tradian also had a Rebbe. Visited his Rebbe. Rav Hanina ben Tradian was famous teaching Torah in the time of the Romans in public, risking his life to teach Torah. And later, this is the person that was buried with the Sefer Torah wrapped around him, and he was burned with the Sefer Torah. Holy man. He goes to his Rebbe, Rav Yossi ben Kisma, and he asked his Rebbe, Ma ani l'chaya olam haba? What am I for the next world? And Rav Yossi ben Kisma asked him, Klum ma'aseh ba b'yadecha? Is there anything you ever did that was good? Wait a second. We're talking about something. Talk about accomplishments. This is a man that accomplished Torah. He taught Torah in public, risking his life. Like, what's bigger than that? What's bigger than that? He said, what did you do? So he said, what did I do? So he answers him, Ma'os shel Purim nechlachti b'ma'os shel tzedakah v'chlachtim la'aniyim. I once mixed up, I had some money that I put together for the Purim Suda. I saved a certain amount of money that got designated, and it got mixed up with my tzedakah money. And I didn't pay attention. I gave the whole thing to tzedakah. So he said, okay, if that's the case, if that's the case, what you get, I should be zeicha to get. And I should get the same, same merits that you get. I hope we all get Olam Haba, I get an Olam Haba like yours. Now, this is really, in comparison to giving up his life teaching Torah, seems pathetic. He once mixed up tzedakah, and he said, okay, I'll give the extra to tzedakah. But it's showing his daily activities. That's what this Gemara is showing us. When a person is so internalized, the little things really show how much a person's serving Hashem. And that's what Avram Avinu, that when we find that he was into perfecting himself. Hanascha tobascha. Tobascha means for your benefit. You're doing mitzvahs not just for the accomplishment of going somewhere. You don't have to even go anywhere. You're just going. Hashem says go, you go. You don't know where? That's another story. We're learning a lesson that going, the effort is what counts. And the little efforts, it's not the accomplishment that Hashem is looking for. There could be someone that did tremendous accomplishments. Who knows if they were expected to accomplish more? And then there's people with very little accomplishments because of maybe they were somehow incapacitated. It's what you do with your life. That's really what counts. Now, we find where Victor Miller brought last week's Parsha. Very interesting. Cain had a very illustrious family. Hevel's family, there was no family of Hevel because Cain killed him. But Cain's family was like the it family. He had several illustrious children. First of all, he had a son called Yaval. Yaval was Yoshvei Ohel Umikneh. They described that what Yaval really did, Yaval, one of the sons of Cain, was a person who made up all kinds of things. He was the first person to invent the concept of a tent. Before people were living in a rock, they could barely, he had to figure out how to help cattle and sheep and all that. How did he foster their growth? He says he was the father of all the shepherding in the world. So he had to figure out two things. Number one, how to transport a portable thing that could have a bigger flock to go with them along their journey. It couldn't just be somewhere like how did it have shelter dealing with all this livestock. He also had to learn how to breed livestock. He had to figure out all the things that would promote livestock. So his generation, that was a huge genius on the part of Yavel that he was able to accomplish that for civilization. Accomplishment, wow, unbelievable. And there's a lot of wisdom. I'll just go digress for a moment. It says, Atach honein la'adam das. Shimon Schwab says that you give people understanding, umelamed la'enosh bina, and you teach civilization deeper understanding. So Shimon Schwab says something brilliant here. There's two things. There's bina and das, right? Bina is usually a woman's thing, and das is a male thing. But there's more to Bina is understanding, inferring something from something else. So Hashem gave the world Das, he gave us Das, but Bina means every generation really is standing on the shoulders of a previous. Like now we think, wow, look at the technology we have today. But we wouldn't have a cell phone if we wouldn't have had the phone. And we wouldn't have had the phone if we wouldn't have had electricity. And, each step was a genius step. So in early civilization, for someone to think of, how to think of shelters so you should be able to breed cattle, brilliant. Now Lamech had another son, also from Lamech was a son of, was Cain. I'm sorry, Lamech had 3 sons. Yes. So there's Yaval, and then there's Yuval. Hu haya avi kol topes kinor v'ugav. He was the father, the inventor of everyone who held the harp and the pipe. So kinor is a harp, and a yugav is like a flute. And he's the father of musical instruments. How did he get it? So he said or Victor Miller thinks he got it from the crickets, because he figured out that vibration can produce a sound. He studied that and he was able to do that. And he would get the Nobel Peace Prize, says Sir Victor Miller, if somebody be alive today with such inventions. And then we have the third son of Lamech, was Tuval Cain, who was Lotesh Kol Choresh Dachoshes Ubarzel, who crafted tools he did something out of metal, tools from copper and iron. He anything with metal, like plows and swords, anything that's metal today was invented originally with Tuval Cain. What happened, said Rav Victor Miller? All these 3 sons perished with the Mabul. Hashem didn't care about accomplishments. He picked Noach instead because he was Tamim and Tzaddik. That's what ultimately, to show us that a Tzaddik really is the reason the world exists, and not these people that are so perfect. It's like losing, the Kennedy family, or something like that. Hashem is really to teach us that accomplishments don't count. It's your purity of heart and how close you get to Hashem. That's really what we're here for in the world. By the way, I think the Arizal says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the Gilgal of Hevel. Hevel had no progeny, but Moshe Rabbeinu then was able to bring sacrifices like on behalf of Hevel, which he had to do to perfect himself. Because Hevel meant well, but he didn't do it with he didn't have the proper kavanas, so Moshe Rabbeinu fixed that for him. So he was the Saked, the Gilgal of Hevel. So everything is perfecting your character. Or Victor Miller gives a suggestion. If you want to work on this, we could try it for a week. Try to do one thing every day that nobody knows about. That way you won't base your life on accomplishments. Look at the world we live in today. It's all about how much do you own, or who are you? What have you accomplished? What courses have you taken? We're looking at it as do something that nobody knows about and make your relationship more pure by Hashem. That's why Hashem wanted to reward Avram Avinu, says Nessim Bachel. Well, I'm almost finished, on every step that he took, because every step really, to not know what you're doing is even greater, because it's all about effort and nothing about accomplishments. That's why that was the test of Avram, to not even know where you're going. Now, there's a little bit different spin on this that we're going to take, and we're also told another thing. So far what we've said is talking about changing, how it gives you humility, how it gives you, how it helps you change your atmosphere. We're also talking about our perfection. Avram, it was more important to Hashem that Abraham did things even though he wasn't supposedly accomplishing anything, because the purity, the perfection of character is more important than the actual actions, the accomplishments rather. Now, Nessim Bachel says something very interesting. We often this Gemara is quoted on when we're talking about Shavuos. We're told about a Rav. Just gonna get a place here. Yeah, in Gemara Pesachim, Rav Yosef, when Shavuos would come, he'd always ask that they bring him some kind of fattened calf to the best meat whatsoever, and he had it roasted. And he says, if it would not be for this day, how many yassis would there be in the shuk? Because of the Torah, look who I am today. So the question is asked, why did he go through all this? What was the point of all that? So Rav Nosson Bachel brings down that a person is supposed to lahanascha. This is what the second part of the Rashi. It's supposed to be for your benefit, your perfection, but it's also a way to a person to inspire themselves is to always say, this is for my good, and to make it pleasant, make life pleasant for yourself. Sometimes a person needs an ice cream. Sometimes a person needs to do something. It inspires them. Says that Rav Nosson Bachel, when a person does something and they get pleasure from it, that's why we daven, B'harevna, make the Torah pleasurable for us. When we make it pleasurable, it sticks for life. That's why the main thing for a child is make Torah sweet for them. The siddur party, they always have or when the kid is an upshur and they lick the honey, and it's at the siddur party, they're all dressed up like kings, with the whole business. And for girls too, we have to make them feel like with really something exciting to do mitzvahs, exciting. Because if we do something for ourselves, if we make it sound like there's something in it for me, that's the human nature. And when we know it's something in it for me, we'll tend to continue doing it forever. So it says, "Ein adam lomed ela b'makom shalipo chafetz." A person can only learn in a yeshiva he wants to learn in. He says a boy should have a big say in which yeshiva he goes to when he's over 13. If he feels I'll learn better here, and if he really means it, then he probably will. Or learn the type of learning he needs to learn. A person needs, because it says Ki'im b'soras Hashem chetzo. Person should first start out. Now this is for women too, because it's not just about learning Torah. Any mitzvah, when we want to initiate a new something in our life, whatever program it is, we should incentivize it for ourselves. We should make it selfish. And it sounds like that's very not Torah-dic, but that's what Hashem told Avram in going, lahanascha, for your pleasure. If we do something for an incentive, then we have to have desire to start it off. We have to first, to acquire any level that we want to gain in avodas Hashem, it's got to be with some kind of bonus for us. Or Victor Miller said, in fact, when Avram was told that he had to leave, and go to, it says, lahanascha tavas, it's going to be for your benefit. The next pasuk, I will bless you. Hashem promised him a bracha if he's going to leave. So it was an incentive, right? Even to Avram Avinu, we have to have this thing. It says, I'll make you a big name, and you're going to have a bracha. Now, another thing, it says in another pasuk in this week's parsha, our Victor Miller brings down, whoever blesses you, I will bless. So our Victor Miller used to go by Jewish houses down Eastern Parkway and give brachas to every Jewish person he saw mezuzah on their door. When we bless a Jew, you should know you get blessed. It's a promise to Avram Avinu. If you bless a Jew, you get blessed. Also, in any time that we're going through something, try to tell ourselves, this is so good for me. Look how much I'm enjoying this. What benefits this has for me. When we think of us ourselves first, then we can give to others more. Then we can do the mitzvah with more perfection, but it has to start out with a selfish point. Victor Miller says something also phenomenal. He says, when you hear bad news, here's somebody died, the first thing you should say is, thank God it's not me. Now that sounds so selfish, but he says that gets the me out of the picture, and then you can mourn with the other family. We should try to remember the selfish parts of the things that incentivize ourselves all the time. We have to remember to do things privately that nobody knows about it. Rav Volba brings down this week's parsha when Avram Avinu was taken out to look at the stars and count them. And that's how much your progeny is going to be. Why did Hashem take him outside? He said sometimes we need even props to help us to serve Hashem. In the old Musar school, they used to, put scalding water and show how hot water is or how hot fire is and say, look, this is what Gehenna is going to be like. Today, we should tell ourselves, if you're licking an ice cream, you should tell yourself, this is just one drop of what Olam Haba is going to be like, or just look at the pleasure I get in helping another person. Look at the pleasure I get in breathing the air. Victor Miller once put his hand under the sink and then he came up for air and he says, people were talking negatively about the air in New York City. He says, when I can't breathe and then I have air, look at air as a pleasure. mean, there's so many negative things we can look at in the world today. Let's focus on the positive things that Hashem has given us, so we can have a closer relationship with him, and so we can improve our character, and we can do all these things that we needed to speak about. So the selfishness will help us. We're working on perfection, not accomplishments. We're working on humility, changing the page, changing our name, making something, a freshness, a newness, that we should renew our situations. That's the lessons we learned from Avraham Avinu. I thank you for listening, and now we can open up to questions.
Okay, great. I think we'll start the
recording.
Yeah.